And it's a very early good morning to you, ladies and gents. Hope you're all well. It's just before 6 o'clock in the morning. London Luke has not slept last night. Basically, where we're going to be going in a minute, after 10 o'clock, is just so rammo and packed out that it just isn't really fun filming, and I don't like filming people without their consent, particularly children. The Great Tower Bridge. You've seen the London skyline. And of course the Tower of London. Now, this is Potter's Fields, the old City Hall. That didn't last long. The new one is at Docklands now. But this was Pickle Herring Street, this where we are. Anyone that's watched my Horsley Down Old Stairs video, you'll know that from there. Anyone that hasn't watched my Horsley Down Old Stairs video, if you want to get a bit of context to what the area looked like years ago, Pickle Herring Street, give it a watch. But where I'm taking you to is over here and through there. And it's relatively quiet this morning, so we're fairly lucky. Take our last view of the London skyline, the Great Tower of London. Look at the history that's seen. My favourite London place, of course. I did do a video recently covering, because 2024, this year, is the 130th anniversary of the construction and opening of Tower Bridge. It opened in 1894 in June. But where we're going to go is over here, and I hope to goodness it's been cleaned since the last time I was here, because it absolutely reeked of vomit, like really strong. Although it's very early in the morning, with one I prepared earlier, we'll be having a beer in a fairly unique location. Tower Bridge approach. Now, if you want to reach to where I'm going to go to, and you're coming from Tower Bridge, you cross Tower Bridge, you come to these stairs, you come down here. And you walk past a Victorian post box, 1894, set up here for the opening of the bridge. See, VR for Victoria Regina. Now, I do then and now posts, don't I, with pictures of how things were years ago and how they are now. So I shall turn you round, and I want you to bear this view in mind for one of those posts. We are going to have one of those then and nows in this video. So we're under Tower Bridge approach, of course, and this is the Vault, a very unique little pub, Horace Jones Vault, constructed in 1894. It's a very, very unique location. So, for one I prepared earlier, join me inside. They've got some brilliant images on the wall in here, so do come in and have a pint. Shad Thames how it was years ago. That's when there was Tower Bridge Beach. There was literally a beach on the banks of the Thames years ago. And best of all, if you've got a table, you get this view. Not often that you can have a beer underneath Tower Bridge. There's an experience for you. The construction of Tower Bridge there. The architect and engineer. And this one, I absolutely love this image, look. One of my lovely page members said about that they used to come and sit on the cannons. There we go. So, let's start this off nicely with our journey, and you'll join me back outside for our tour along London's longest street. And you do indeed join me back outside. You can just see the arch to the top left, which is the starting of which is now a pub. But you join me in the summer of 1947, 77 years ago. And I love being able to do these comparison views of then and now. To the left, our first building that you can see to the left is the Anchor Brew House, missing its gangways nowadays, but thankfully still with us because it takes us to Horsley Down Old Stairs and that amazing view of Tower Bridge. And as I say, these then and now things are a favourite of mine. So, on that note, I will drag us kicking and screaming 77 years back into the present. So off we go. And we are back in the present, 77 years later. That same view, quite changed. But quite a lot of the old still remains, so you'll hopefully enjoy this one. We now leave Pickle Herring Street and come on to Shad Thames. So I'm just going to pause you while we get past this lorry. We have now passed the lorry. Walk down that way for the Anchor Tap, the way we've just come from, and I can't resist showing you. We won't be staying long because I've already shown it, but for those who haven't seen it, watch the specific Horsley Down Old Stairs video. Oh gosh, how common. Someone's urinated upon the stairs. Oh no, it's the tide. I beg your pardon. Someone creates a wee of that quantity. Hey, they need to go and see a doctor. And here we are at Horsley Down Old Stairs. she'll now be back off. So, pause you and you'll join me back out there. As we leave Horsley down Old Stairs and the old Anchor Brew House behind. This is Shad Thames, and it's one of Docklands, this part of Docklands, most original surviving streets. Many of the buildings survived and have been reutilised in the Docklands development into shops, apartments and offices. When you see the history segment at the end of this part, you'll be shocked to see how it was in the 1980s. And some of you, including myself, who are old enough, and I was a very little boy at the time, about 5, coming past in my dad's taxi quite often. I remember a lot of the old buildings and a lot of the old warehouse buildings that were still standing in Pickle Herring Street. Now this is an interesting little route. It's called Maggie Blake's Calls, and it will take you out onto the same view really as Horsley downstairs. But if you go out in that way, all along this way are lovely restaurants and bars and eateries. But our route is Pickle Herring Street, and these wrought iron gangways, they are original. They first started off as wooden ones. Then as the weight of cargoes increased, wrought iron had to be brought in. And it's lovely that they've survived. And they are now used by the residents of the flats as like little garden areas, which is nice. And this is called the Watch House. And if you want to come and see a real original part of Docklands, London, have a walk down this street, because you've got old world mixed with new. And when you see the state of what it became, because a lot of people say, oh, it's a shame it had to turn into this. It is, yeah, of course it is. But the docks died when container shipping and things like that came in. These places were struggling long before that to cope with cargoes and things like that. So come the 1980s, this world was a derelict world. These gates here are important, so bear them in mind for in a minute. See these gangways. You get a nice view there, look. That's what I said to you about the eateries and restaurants are all along this way, and there's lovely views of the Thames. But these gates are very relevant to the story of this street and what we're going to see in a minute, which is just up here on the left. But don't you love these? Look. So you've got like single ones here, and then you've got these ones that go off into different areas. And the reason these were built was so when cargoes were unloaded on the dock side, on the riverside here, so the cargoes could be brought further inland without being stolen while they were on the ground. Because, I mean, this place, I'm not being horrible, most of my ancestors were dockers and lightermen and things like that. If they could half-inch something, which to someone who doesn't know Cockney rhyming slang, that means pinch, steal, they would. So yeah, and they were watchful. Spices, tobacco, rum, things like that would be unloaded into these buildings here from the ships, rolled further inland under the watchful eye of foremen, who are probably themselves on the fiddle as well sometimes. And here we are. Remember I said to you to bear the gates in mind? Luckily for our tour, which I'll tell you about the end call or end game location in a minute, Hall of London, Shad Thames. Shad Thames is the best surviving example of the type of street that was very common in London's Docklands before any redevelopment had taken place. It is now almost unique, flanked by tall warehouses on either side. It is crossed at different heights by lattice wrought iron bridges. Across these, dockers would push barrows when transferring tea, spices and other foodstuffs from the riverside warehouses to those further inland. Beside the large ornate iron gates which we've just walked by, the dockers would gather for the call-on twice a day in the hope of being hired for half a day's work in the warehouses. In the docks where my granddad worked, Victoria Docks, Royal Albert Docks, those ones, it was called standing on the stones. You would go and stand on the stones and hope to be hired for a day's work. And my granddad was well over 6 foot tall, an extremely hard-working man, and was usually not short of work. Became a stevedore in the end. One of my nan's memories of granddad's docking life, and it never left her, ever. They had a boat coming of bloodfish and bone meal, and some men were offered overtime work because it was a disgusting, revolting job. See the warehouses that go further inland? Yeah, it was a revolting, disgusting job, because if anyone that's ever smelt bloodfish and bone meal, it reeks. So these men were offered overtime, and my granddad was one of them that accepted it, to scoop out cargo holds full of bloodfish and bone meal. Anyway, by the time he came back home, my nan said you literally couldn't get the smell off of him for days. I mean, this is the never throw anything away generation. They had to burn those clothes. Got paid £5 for that though. See, look. New against old and utilised buildings. And if you want to come and do this street and you're what is known in the trade as a live streamer, I don't like calling myself a live streamer, but that's what we're known as, us creatures. Come and do it very early. Get here for around 6 o'clock. I mean, I left home this morning just before 5. Get here for around 6 o'clock, or earlier if you can, depending on the light, because come 10 o'clock this street is so packed that you if you want to take pictures, atmospheric pictures, and zoom in and focus on things with any length of time. I mean, I'm not really having to move too fast at all this morning, because on YouTube I've not had some complaints, but it's not even constructive criticism really, it's just suggestions I suppose for helping to improve the page. A few people have said that it disorientates them if you move too fast. I am sorry about that, genuinely I am, but sometimes with me, anyone that knows me, has been on my page for a while, you'll know that I don't like filming people without their consent, particularly kids. I mean, kids are sacred, so you don't go there. So sudden movements and such like are normally for that reason. So I don't like filming people without their consent. And Shad Thames goes around into a modern and old world. And where I'm going to take you to next is a fascinating old world as well. And at the end of this video, you're going to see pictures of how it was, Shad Thames, and where we're going now. Oh, it's lovely and cool at this time in the morning. Yesterday, which was Tuesday, was London's hottest day of the year so far. So I certainly couldn't have done this. What I did was went and filmed the Church of St Mary Woolnoth, a request filming for one of my page members. And if any of you other lovely page members have anything you particularly like me to film or photograph for you, just let me know. It's not a problem if it's within travelling distance, and I try not to travel really further than outside of the city or over the river here, this kind of distance. I mean, I don't drive, so And these are the old warehouses with new builds, but where the interest point starts is over here. More gangways and balconies where there once would have been wooden platforms with the old, you know, like the old arch type crane things that can pulleys that came out, because just through there is St Saviour's Dock. Now when we get to the end of this street, Shad Thames, I'll tell you more about that. But these old warehouses, as we're going to see, come the 1980s, were completely abandoned. None of them were being used anymore. Jealous when I see those old pictures. I thought, oh my God, if I'd only been born 15 years earlier, I could have been wandering around. Although we didn't have cameras like for filming and whatnot. You had cameras to take pictures, of course. But look, you've got Java Wharf, Java, and St Andrew's Porter. See, that's what I like as well, that they've kept a lot of the old signs, like Butler's and Colonial Wharf. There's an old millstone through there. Sorry, I had to move quick. There's someone on there. I think I don't like filming people without their consent. That's not fair. And here we've got St Andrew's Wharf. These gangways were put in to replace old ones when the street was redeveloped in the Docklands development. But like we see in Shad Thames, you would have had very similar going across the street here. I'm going to point you this way for a minute. No, I'm going to pause you for a sec. There we are. Off we go. St Saviour's. St George's Wharf, Christians. New builds. See, some of the old warehouses were in such an extreme state of disrepair that they had to be pulled down. But where they could renovate, they did. And I like that. You've got St George's Wharf, Christians there. You've got a statue there. Something to check out for another time. See, there are only so many subjects I can cover in one video, really, because obviously it gets confusing. My memory is only so retentive to a degree. And you've got Shutters Wharf, Dockhead Wharf, and where we're coming to in a minute is known as Dockhead. And this, if you're a Dickens fan, you're a fan of Old World London, you're going to like where I'm going to take you in a minute. Today is going to be a very long journey. It's going to be in parts, because you're following me all the way from Shad Thames, where we've just left, to the Mayflower Pub and St Mary's Church, Rotherhithe, also with strong Mayflower links and connections. Jamaica Wharf, so called because as we leave Shad Thames behind, we come onto Jamaica Road, a road that's lined with very modern buildings, well, not very modern in some cases, post-war and modern, because a lot of it was bombed badly in the war. So, but there are a couple of the old Georgian houses that still remain. So, as we leave Shad Thames behind, we go to our next historical area. And it's interesting. You walk up these stone stairs here, onto this platform, and you come to St Saviour's Dock. Now, St Saviour's Dock, exactly what it says on the tin, really. Where we were just walking is on the land side and the opposite side of those, so things would have been offloaded here, worked inwards. But it's got a long and pretty dark history, this place. A lost patch of London was known as Jacob's Island, which was in this area, because this is was the mouth, the opening of the River Neckinger. And St Saviour's Dock, it was a really notorious crime-ridden area, because a lot of these boats that came in to unload would have to wait for ages to be unloaded. The ports of London and docks were so busy, hence why they built the later docks in the East End and such. But these big cargo ships and Thames lighters laying there with all this wealthy merchandise on board was such a tempting thing to pirates, and pirates would stalk and steal, and if they got caught, they'd be hung at the mouth of the River Neckinger. And where the River Neckinger, believed to get its name from, is the Neckinger, the neckerchief, London slang for a hangman's noose, which would hang the pirates. So, that's St Saviour's, and was the River Neckinger, another one of London's lost or covered over rivers, which would have once originally wound its way in through here and out into the Thames, like the Fleet, which is also covered over and lost now, but not lost, but covered over. But yeah, this is St Saviour's, and where I'm going to take you to first is right at the end bit there, with some photos I took previously. We'll just pause you a minute and walk along. No, I won't pause you. I'll live dangerously and hope I don't fall over. There we are. Because just across there is a bridge, which you can now cross over, of course, done in the Docklands development. So I've taken some pictures of that, so I'll show you those, and then we're going to have history at the end of this segment, and then you'll join me for part 2. And for our last little historical look back on this part, we start off where we began, firstly with Shad Thames, which you see here in its working life in 1890. Love images like this. It really brings these places to life and shows us what they were really like. It would have been hustle and bustle, horses and carts and men and barrows and barrels and everything. You can imagine the noise. Must have been an interesting world. And here we see it at the end of its life in the 1980s, these images. And St Saviour's Dock, very interesting, and old world made new. Its origins go way back into the past and are pretty dark in some places. As I mentioned in our tour, it was originally Jacob's Island, based around the River Neckinger, which feeds this inlet, and a notorious spot both for the hangings of pirates, crime, and Charles Dickens based a couple of his stories here. St Saviour's Dock. In the 18th century, the Thames was so busy that cargoes were often stranded on ships for weeks. The area became notorious for pirates who attacked the moored vessels. If caught, they were hanged at the mouth of this dock. The river that fed the inlet took the name Neckinger from the devil's Neckinger, neckerchief, London slang for a noose to execute pirates. The hydraulic cable stay swing bridge across the dock, which is there nowadays, was installed in 1995 to connect up the Thames path. The use of stainless steel and timber is an unusual design and blends well with the yachts and boats in the area, and it has won many design awards. And here is that said bridge. And now we see St Saviour's Dock, and in this particular image, Jacob's Island, 1827. Jacob's Island would eventually be swept away as Docklands developed further. It was a hellhole and a slum in the 1840s and before. Circa 1840s, St Saviour's Dock. Famous for its mentions by Charles Dickens. This is where Bill Sikes' lair was based. You know, when you see him walk all the way through the streets, and where he and Nancy lived in Oliver Twist. And that's where his lair was based. St Saviour's Dock in 1902 by F. Haskins. St Saviour's Dock, circa 1900, busy in its working life. 1980, right at the very end of its life, and you can see that the fancy new balconies have not been put in place yet. Many of the cranes are still in place, and these buildings at the time, beg your pardon, these buildings at the time were an abandoned world which I would have loved to have had a look around. 1980 again. From the 1980s onwards, the majority of the wharfs lining St Saviour's Docks would be converted into apartments and offices. A walk along the side of the street that follow the docks to the east and west reveals how many have survived, as we saw in our tour. And now, back into the present, where we will join me back at St Saviour's Dock, and that will be for part 2, where we shall carry on our journey towards the Mayflower pub and the Church of St Mary's, Rotherhithe, with its Mayflower links. Fascinating little area. So off we go. Join me for part 2.